September 1939, the German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II.
Michael, hi, how are you? Welcome. I think there's no better person for JLTV to have on than you to explain to everybody who doesn't know, or even though people who do know, the ramifications of the Yom HaShoah.
The question is, what should be Holocaust Remembrance Day? And that was a tremendous debate. You could begin by saying January 30th should be Holocaust Remembrance Day. That's the day Hitler came to power. No Hitler, no Holocaust. One could begin by saying September 1, 1930, September 1 should be Holocaust Remembrance Day because no World War II, the day the war began, no Holocaust. One could say that January 20th should be Holocaust Memorial Day, and that's because on January 20th you had the Wannsee Conference, January 20th, 1942, and the Wannsee Conference was the day in which the Holocaust took a new turn. Instead of mobile killers going to stationary victims, they reversed the process and they created the death camps, and they began to move well into the murder process. One could say, for example, that November 9th through 11th would be Holocaust Memorial Day, Kristallnacht, the November pogroms. The Israelis were pushing the secular Israelis were pushing that Holocaust Remembrance Day should be as close to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was April 19th, the first day of Passover. If you established it on the first day of Passover, Jews would live in a contradiction that was too acute, too impossible. They would have to celebrate the Exodus and liberation and at the same time the Shoah and decimation and destruction. So they came to a political compromise, which was to push the Holocaust Remembrance Day beyond the week of Passover, but as close to April 19th as possible. They chose the 27th of Nisan, which is a day after Passover that can never occur on Shabbat, close enough in proximity to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And the original notion of Yom HaShoah was it was Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, Holocaust and Resistance Day, Holocaust and Heroism Day, because of the resistance of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The world now commemorates January 27th, which is the liberation of Auschwitz by Soviet troops, as International Holocaust Remembrance Days. And many other countries have their own Remembrance Day. For example, March 11th is the Remembrance Day in North Macedonia because Macedonian Jewry was decimated and brought to monopole on March 11th. Other countries have other days, but for the Jewish people, the day is the 27th of Nisan, which always occurs right after the conclusion of Passover and is commemorated worldwide by the Jewish community. This year is especially important because it's the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and Yom HaShoah coincides with the secular date for the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And as we continue our conversation, I want to set the scene of what April 1943 was like, because April 1943, you had many things going on at the same time. In the United States, that was when the great pageant occurred, We Shall Never Die, which was the attempt led by people like Peter Bergson and Ben Hecht, with the help of somebody like Arthur Szyk, the great illustrator, and people like Edward G. Robinson, Clark Gable, Paul Muni, a whole range of actors from Hollywood to call attention to the plight of the Jews.
500 of our women and children were led to the marketplace and stood against the vegetable stalls we knew so well. Here the Germans turned machine guns on us and killed us all. Remember us.
In Belgium, it was the 20th train en route to Auschwitz was stopped, and resistance broke out by a brilliant young Jewish doctor in training, a physician in training, who figured that he could stop a train by just signaling a red light. Stood with a lantern and a red light, the train stopped, and then he had a group board the train and open the doors and give them the opportunity to leave. In Bermuda, there was an international conference on the 20th of on this day in April of 1945, and it was coinciding with Passover to keep Jews away. And it was held in Bermuda because Bermuda was a closed island at that point. And the world gathered, the leadership of the United States, of Great Britain, gathered at that point to consider what to do about the refugees. And as you know, very well know, nothing very much was done. And finally, in Warsaw, this was the day in which Jews went from the Passover Seder into armed uprising against the Germans, because April 20th was Hitler's 54th birthday, and Himmler wanted to present Hitler with a gift for his 54th birthday, which was a Judenrein, a Jew-free Warsaw. So German troops surrounded the ghetto. They were helped by Ukrainian troops as well. And they had trains in the Umschlagplatz, in the deportation point, ready to go to liquidate, to destroy the entire ghetto. And that's the moment when the Jews rose in armed rebellion.
But that takes care of the physical stuff. Let's talk a little about, as you know, Michael, I'm from Hungary, and I'm actually doing this program from Hungary in Budapest. I lost about 80 relatives, including my paternal grandparents and my paternal and two aunts, my father's sisters. Every Hungarian Jew like myself has dozens of people that they lost, whether grandparents or other. So we're all affected physically. And here I am at 75 years of age. I've known about the Holocaust since I was 4 or 5 years old. I knew that these grandparents were not around, and I asked my father, well, where are my grandparents? And he explained to me about Auschwitz. He explained to me about being in Mauthausen, which he survived. So by 70 years, I have been in my kishkas with the Holocaust. You, as a professional historian, as a rabbi, you've been working on this also for 3 decades, and I don't think there's anybody right now alive with more knowledge about what has happened, but not just knowledge. I know you very well, and I know how emotionally this whole thing affects you. And I wonder, when you and I are gone and we're Sadrer, I wonder if there's going to be anybody who is going to be doing a program like this. I'm not so sure. Michael, let's continue this question I have from you in a few minutes, because we need a commercial break. So hold on, Michael. Welcome back, and I'm glad the audience is back as well, and I hope you stayed. My last question was, who is going to do this after you and I are long gone?
I'm happy you asked, and I'm pleased you asked, because I have an answer. I have in my office, as we're speaking, a young, brilliant documentary filmmaker who did a fabulous film And he's here because we're working this afternoon on a film on Treblinka. See, I teach, and not only do I teach, but I spend a good deal of my life trying to mentor the younger generation to remember. And we now have an entire generation that is deeply committed to memory. I will be going directly to Poland for the March of Living, which will bring 12,000 young people from all over the world, from countries that you don't think of as having large Jewish populations like Costa Rica and Panama, even Cuba, Israel, the United States, and all of the European countries, Argentina, the Latin American countries, all of the European countries will bring 12,000 youngsters to Auschwitz. They will march between Auschwitz and Birkenau, and they will be part of a generation that absorbs the memory. Now, clearly, we are about to lose the survivor generation. And when we lose the survivor generation, it means we're moving between lived history and historical memory. But the heir of that historical memory are going to be some great institutions that have been created, and also a whole range of individuals that understand the Holocaust, that probe the Holocaust, that explore the Holocaust, and see a deep and profound meaning in the Holocaust, and try to present it to the next generations and also to the American public in general. People are interested in the Holocaust, and Auschwitz is a title. As you know, Auschwitz is the world capital of evil. It's the most sacred, anti-sacred place on the globe. Auschwitz itself draws 2 million people, and an exhibition that we have on Auschwitz is drawing people all over the place. And most of the visitors, almost all of the visitors, are non-Jews interested in the Holocaust and interested in learning. And even the person who put the exhibition together, Louis Ferrara, is a Spanish Jew. And Spain, remember, was untouched by the Holocaust. They were too exhausted by what happened in the Spanish Civil War to be able to fight. So I'm much more optimistic. I am pessimistic about one thing, which is I wish that I was speaking about the past. But when we speak about the Holocaust, we have echoes of the present and foreboding feelings about the future. Let's give you an example. When we created the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in 1993, we were living at a time when democracy was on the rise. Totalitarian Soviet Union had fallen, and every one of the countries, Hungary, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Bulgaria, all of these countries were all of a sudden experiencing what? East Germany, the great joy of democracy and the great blessing of freedom. We're now in a world where democracy is fragile, and we have to explore what happened between 1918 and 1933 in what took Germany from a democracy into a polarized authoritarian government and ultimately into a totalitarian government capable of committing genocide. So all of a sudden we have, unfortunately, less confidence in the future of democracy and less confidence in the stability of the world. And again, an explosion of hatred that is taking place, and anti-Semitism is rising in our world today as well. The Poles have a extreme right-wing government that is trying to essentially say, and on this, they want to say three things. On two of the things, they're correct. On one of the things, they're shading the history. They want to say that Poles were victims of Nazism, and ultimately they even want to claim victims of the Holocaust. And it's true that Poles were victimized. They were invaded and occupied in 1939. and Poland became the site of death camps, but they are not Polish death camps, as President Obama once mistakenly said, and as many people mistakenly say. They are Nazi death camps in German-occupied Poland. Poland then wants to claim its own victimization without coming to terms with the second part, which is that though many Poles objected to the German occupation, they did not object, and some collaborated, participated, and took part in, and indeed enjoyed the fruits of the German implementation of the final solution to the Jewish problem. So they want the Israeli youngsters to go and to see some of the good sides of Polish behavior without understanding the dark side of what happened in Poland, which included betrayal and collaboration and participation in the murder of their Jewish communities.
Let's hold this right now. The sponsor is scratching my back, so please hold on to this thought and please come back to us in a few minutes. Welcome back. Our special guest is historian, rabbi, teacher, friend, Michael Berenbaum. Michael, welcome back.
Thank you.
The last thought, please finish.
Well, again, the Poles are seeking to whitewash their own responsibility and to cast all blame on the Germans for what happened. You know, Steve, because you're in Budapest now.
This is whitewash country. There's more whitewash here than in any paint store in America.
And you understand what the Hungarians are trying to do. Let's first begin by setting the stage for the Holocaust in Hungary. The Holocaust in Hungary becomes enormously perplexing when you consider that up until 1944, Jews were persecuted, but they weren't killed. March 19th, 1944, Germany invades Hungary. And then in March and April, they ghettoized the Jews. And between the 15th of May and the 8th of July, 437,402 Jews are deported primarily to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where more than 8 in 10 were killed upon arrival. So the Holocaust in Hungary intensified. 54 days, 147 trains, an average of 2,950 Jews were sent to Auschwitz each day, 2.75 trains per day. It happened in 1944 when everybody knew that Germany was going to lose the war, and it happened in 1944 when Germany was fighting a two-front war. The Allies were invading from Italy. The Allies were invading after June 6th, 1944. They were invading continental Europe from France. The Soviet Union was invading from the east, and Germany used that moment to murder the Hungarian Jewish population. Now the Hungarians.
Just a second. With very few troops, Eichmann had very few troops. Without the Hungarian help, it would never happen.
The Hungarians now want to blame it all on the Germans without speaking about the Iron Guard, without speaking of the role of the anti-Semites and of the formal participation of Hungarians in the murder of their own Jewish community. And you know that you have historians now, or quasi-historians in Hungary, who are rewriting even the exhibitions in the Holocaust Museum to exonerate the Hungarians and to blame it all on the Germans. And you know, there's this magnificent memorial on the Danube of the boots, the empty boots, because in the fall of 1944, And the details of this are incredible. They tied Jews up and they put them into the Danube, and then to save ammunition, they shot every other Jew. And then the Jew in between would drown by the weight of those who had been shot. This was not done by Germans. It was not done by formal German Nazis. It was done by Hungarian troops and by Hungarian Iron God.
Hungarian Arrow Cross.
The Hungarian Arrow Cross was doing this. And now you have the attempt to forget about this memorial, to forget about what the role of Hungary was. And look, we have an attempt all over the world of people who don't want to confront their own painful history, and their own history, which is less than heroic. And in this case, it's we don't even want to call it less than heroic, which is awful, evil, terrible, and participatory and collaborationist and enablers and facilitators, because they want to what? They want to claim a certain type measure of heroism. And this is a phenomenon of revisionism, not Holocaust denial, but Holocaust minimalization and rewriting of history that is taking place in several countries. By the way, the exception to this, ironically, is Germany, which accepts responsibility for what it did in the past and has decided we don't want to be like them. We want to be a democratic society that respects human rights and human dignity. And therefore, Germany has a Jewish community that is increasing in size. There's a sizable Israeli population living in Berlin and finding themselves able to live a Jewish life in Germany, something that would have been unpredictable because Germany remembers its past. You know, in the 1990s, France had to reshape its own understanding of its own history. France originally spoke about the greatness of the resistance, and then with the trial of Barbie, had to deal with collaboration, and then even discovered that its former president, Mitterrand, had not only not been a hero of the resistance, but he had been a collaborator with the Nazis. And they had to begin to understand that they were participants in the Holocaust and not just its victims.
Michael, we are running out of time, but I want to continue with you to discuss the Holocaust. We are going to bring you back next week, Michael, for part 2 of Never Forget. Bye, Michael.
Bye-bye.